Good day, my friends. Lately, there's been a lot of talk surrounding the New World, which is a massive continent far to the west of Eorzea. I find this interesting, as we know much more about this land than many people seem to understand. Some may ask, how can that be possible, as it's not exactly been common for people to travel that far west during the Garlean invasion. And they'd be right. However, what we'll be discussing today happened long before the invasion of Garlemald, and of course, the Seventh Umbral Calamity. Gather around, my friends, as today we'll be covering the lives of those not native to the three great continents. Today, we'll be discussing the Mamool Ja, and their home, the New World. As stated, the Mamool Ja are not native Eorzeans. In fact, their homeland, the New World, is considered to be one of our star's three largest landmasses. The two others, of course, would be the land of Mericidia to the south, and the three great continents of Aldenard, Othard, and Ilsabard, of which you are already intimately familiar. Believe it or not, there was once a time when scholars debated on whether or not the New World existed in the first place. We had scrolls, ancient recordings, and folklore that spoke of a massive continent to the west, but no solid evidence proving it existed. Even artifacts said to have been from the New World were debated as simply being relics from a forgotten Eorzean civilization. But as we all know, mystery is the bed from which curiosity awakens, and it was only a matter of time until someone chose to answer the call to adventure. The one who would finally put the debates to rest was a sea wolf Rogadin named Ketan Ram the Blue. At heart, he was a Lominsan adventurer, and eventually worked up the nerve to gather a crew and sail westward. It was in the year 1497 of the Successful Era that they finally set sail. He did not know for certain what was out there, or if they'd even find anything in the first place. Yet he chose to make the trip all the same. For 2 months, Ketan Ram and his crew sailed the high seas, scanning the wide open ocean for any sign of land. It was only toward the end of the second month that they saw something large on the horizon. To say that Ketan Ram and his associates were ecstatic to make landfall is an understatement. In fact, he was so pleased with his discovery that he wanted to dub the New World as Ketanland. From what notes I could find, no one but him liked the name, so of course, it never stuck. The dream of Ketanland was very short-lived. But I suppose it was all for the best, as Ketan Ram and his men would survey and explore the New World for several months, documenting all they found and taking some souvenirs for themselves. They would move further inland and eventually discovered the natives of this area, the Mamool Ja. Indeed, Ketan Ram and his crew were the ones to make first contact with these unique tribes. The idea of a sailor from Limsa Lominsa acting as a cultural ambassador would make most scholars panic. However, despite their rugged ways, or perhaps because of them, Ketan Ram made a good first impression with the natives. He was surprised to see that the Mamool Ja weren't just some displaced beast tribes, but had their own thriving culture, just as developed and structured as any city-state back in Eorzea. It was then that Ketan Ram was brought before their nation's supreme ruler, a massive two-headed Mamool Ja called the Autarch. His notes express that the Autarch carried himself with the aura of a king, and as such, he made sure to pay him the proper respects. As such, he offered the Autarch many rare items from Eorzea as gifts, honoring the leader of the Mamool Ja for his power and hospitality. This went over extremely well, as the Autarch was greatly pleased and impressed by these Eorzean gifts. In fact, it went so well that the Autarch himself bestowed Ketan Ram with a huge idol made purely out of silver. Thus began their friendship, as the autarch gave Ketenram and his crew free reign to wander his nation during their stay. They took full advantage of this boon, partaking of the Mamool Ja's culture and mapping out the area in its entirety. They even collected seeds from various fruits and vegetables to bring back to Eorzea later. So if you ever wondered where culinary staples such as ogre pumpkins, alligator pears, ruby tomatoes, or popitos came from, well, now you know. They're originally from the New World. But as the days passed, it eventually came time for Ketenram to travel back east to Eorzea. He thanked the autarch and the Mamool Ja for their friendship and set sail. Upon returning home, they explained everything. They spoke of pristine beaches, densely packed jungles, looming mountains, and of course, they spoke of the people who inhabited these lands. They explained the Mamool Ja, their culture, beliefs, and how they were different from Eorzea. Even rumors of a golden city was on their lips. But they didn't just bring back hearsay. Thanks to their cartographers and sketchings from the Mamool Ja, they had up-to-date maps of the region they had visited, citing that what they saw was likely only a modest piece of the New World in its entirety. These events were almost 100 years ago. Ketenram and his crew had made history as the ones to not only prove the location of the New World, but the existence of people like the Mamool Ja who live there. 80 years have come and gone since then, and many ships have traveled to and from the New World since then. Even Admiral Merlweb had visited the New World on more than one occasion back when she was still a pirate captain. So, as you can guess, the sea routes are very well documented now. No longer was the New World this big mystery, as many people have traveled to and from the landmass quite regularly. However, as Eorzea became embroiled in conflict, these trips became less frequent, and when the Garlean Empire began its invasion, talk of traveling to the New World stopped almost entirely. Of course, there were still a few ships that took their chances and braved the seas, but Garlean occupation intimidated a lot of people. And lastly, with the advent of the Seventh Emerald Calamity, the continent of Aldenard was officially in a state of conflict. And yet, when that information reached the New World, it was music to the ears of the Mamool Ja. Upon learning that Eorzea was having trouble, many different groups of Mamool Ja began to sail eastward to Eorzea. Now, that may sound nefarious, but in all honesty, most of the Mamool Ja who sailed eastward wished to make themselves useful. And to understand why they do that, we need to discuss their culture. The name Mamool Ja is a name given to both their nation and their people, as there are more than one distinct type of Mamool Ja. These different types are often referred to as tribes, and you're likely already familiar with two of them. The first one we'll discuss are the Hubigo tribe. These individuals are characterized by their brownish tan hide with a crest-like appendage sticking out of their head. This tribe is well known for having thicker and more tightly wound muscle than other tribes, making them value brute strength and martial prowess over anything else. You'll often see members of the Hubigo tribe acting as frontline fighters, archers, and heavy lifters when compared to other Mamool Ja. The second most common type you've seen in Eorzea likely belong to the Bunawa tribe. This tribe is easily identified for their hide coming in shades of purple, with large chameleon-like eyes on their head. The Bunawa are practically the opposite of the Hubigo. Their bodies aren't as physically strong, but they're more often born with deep pools of personal ether. This means that almost all Bunawa have the ability to become very competent mages. As such, the Bunawa are often seen as the magic casters or ritual performers of the Mamool Ja. There is a third tribe of Mamool Ja that's traveled to Eorzea, but they're not as well known. These individuals are of the Dopro tribe, and they're more well known for their ability to tame animals. Similar to Eastern Beastmasters, members of the Dawntrail tribe know how best to train and interact with a variety of creatures. This often makes them into powerful beast riders as well as reliable animal handlers. At first glance, these tribes look drastically different from one another, but they often get along well and work fine together, because despite their differences, they see themselves as one people. While they may belong to unique tribes, all of them are Mamool Ja. However, there is an unspoken rule that different tribes aren't supposed to marry or mate with members of other tribes. But it turns out there's a reason for this as well. Because the marriage between two different members of different tribes are supposed to be done under the observation of specific religious ceremonies. And it's suggested that these ceremonies are what helps to give birth to a king. When two members of different tribes are wed under these rituals, their offspring has the chance to become something very unique. They may give birth to a two-headed child, with one head from both clans. Most races would see this as a massive deformity, but to the Mamool Ja, this is sacred. A child born with two heads are called the Blessed Siblings, and as soon as they're born, they are groomed for leadership. The reason for this is because Blessed Siblings are expected to contend for the autarch throne, becoming the next leader of the Mamool Ja. When they come of age, a two-headed Mamool Ja will take charge of a warband and is expected to use them to prove their worth as both a warrior and a leader. These warbands often become adventurers, explorers, and sellswords, doing everything they can to prove their might and reliability, as only the greatest among the Blessed Siblings are allowed to sit upon their people's throne as autarch. And this is why many groups of Mamool Ja migrated to Eorzea during times of trouble. For the most part, what you're looking at are members of warbands trying to offer their services and earn glory for their leader. But that's not to say that all the Mamool Ja in Eorzea are here because of a would-be autarch, and not all of them have been patient and kind. Some warbands believe in taking what they want through force. In fact, there was an entire event at the ruins of Nim where a warband leader became a bit overzealous. Their warband was called the Silver Scales, and they chose to raid the Wanderer's palace, enslaving the local tomberries without a care. But I already did an entire lesson on that event, so I won't repeat myself here. But I will say this. After the Silver Scales were dealt with, there was one less Blessed Sibling competing for the throne. However, despite the friction we've experienced with some of their warbands, Eorzeans are on good terms with many Mamool Ja, and we've learned plenty about the New World and its variety of lands from them. They've even shared their understanding of magic with us, as they have a unique way of enchanting objects like totems that grant boons to those who use them. So, as you can see, the New World and its people aren't this massive mystery. We've known quite a bit about them for some time now, as a century is a long while to exchange resources and information. However, while things in Eorzea may have finally calmed down and moved into a time of peace, that is not to say that the New World doesn't have problems of its own. So the question becomes this. Now that the Garlean threat is gone, how many people will travel westward to see the New World for themselves? So, if you do decide to sail westward, make sure to pack a few gifts for the autarch. And stay safe, my friends. Thank you all for watching to the end. If you enjoyed this video, why not subscribe and share this with your fellow adventurers? With your help, I'll try to reach out even further and bring even greater stories to you. Although, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge my biggest contributors. A grand thank you to Amina Viltaria, Travan Shea, Vavalis Oma, Sage Mouse, Sinalv Bagel, and Sizani, with an additional nod to the scholarships on screen. Links to things like my Twitter and that of my channel artist Caddy can be found in the description. Thank you all for your viewership as well as your support, and I hope all of you have a wonderful day. Class dismissed.